Are we live online as well yet? Okay, fantastic. Welcome back to our afternoon session of Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium. We are going to now talk to some of the executive committee members about a few fun questions about the return to the moon and from their perspective. So we have 3 members in person and we have 3 members online that will be above them on the screen for all of those of you in the room. And hopefully so Mitch, if you want to have it focused on them while I'm asking questions instead of me online, that would be great. Because I don't need to be on the camera more than necessary. All right, so I'm gonna introduce everyone's name and title, but then I would like to ask each panelist to say a little bit more about themselves and their background, just a couple, 1 to 3 sentences, and then we'd like to get right into the discussion. So I will begin with the folks online. So we have David Murrow from Lockheed Martin, who is not in the room program, but we will make sure is online. He was not sure if he'd be able to make it or not. We have Ariel. Okay, excellent. We have Ariel Ekblaw from MIT Space and Exploration Initiative. And we have George Sowers from Colorado School of Mines. And then in the room here, we've got Dr. Michael Miller from Southwest Research Institute, Dr. Ryan Watkins from NASA, who is here representing the CLIPS office in doing her best Joel Kearns impersonation. And then we've got Jessy Kate Schingler from Open Lunar Foundation. So we're going to talk through some of the content of the meeting and their perspectives on the importance of all of this. So let's start online and go in the order that I just introduced folks. David, if you'd like a couple minutes just to talk about, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Dave Murrow. I work at Lockheed Martin in our business development area. I started my life as an engineer doing navigation and slowly moved to bigger and bigger sort of scope and interest areas. So business development is a great place because I get to interact with folks like this entire community. I'll just say that that's really the reason why myself and Lockheed Martin are here, is because we want to do our part as much as we can to help grow this community. It requires the commitment of all of us and the success of all of us to make this community and lunar exploration thrive. So thanks for the opportunity to be on the committee, Rachel, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with the rest of you today.
Okay, and now let's go to Ariel, please.
Hi, Rachel and LSIC community. Thank you for having me today. I'll just echo David's comments. It's really a pleasure to be on the committee, and we're very excited to support and continue the great work of LSIC thus far. I'm the founder and director of the MIT Space Exploration Initiative. This is an interdisciplinary research program and a flight opportunities program. So we've flown over 60 payloads across zero-G flights, suborbital launches, ISS missions. And I'm also MIT's PI for our Return to the Moon mission. MIT's on a commercial services contract for a lunar mission next summer. And so we're really excited to be working some of this through with LSIC. And the last thing I'll mention is that my personal research and passion is in autonomous robotic self-assembly. That's what I did my PhD work in, and we just launched a new entity called the Ariel Institute focused on space habitation, and looking forward to working with LSIC community through this as well. Thanks for having me.
Great. And now George.
Hello, everyone. I'm George Sowers. I'm a professor at the Colorado School of Mines, supporting the world's first and only graduate program in space resources. Before joining Mines in 2017, I had 30 years of experience in big aerospace with Mark Marietta, then Lockheed Martin, and then finally United Launch Alliance. When I retired from there in 2017, I was the chief scientist. My research interest, which started back in my Lockheed and ULA days, is in helping to create the refueling economy in space. And that has a big intersection with the moon, if we can develop the water resources at the poles for liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen propellants.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, Michael? Oh, can you push the
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I don't sell phones, but I'm an institute scientist. I've been at Southwest for only 37 years, still going. But my background is really as a synthetic and physical chemist. And so my research interests concern primarily in-situ resource utilization and how do we make things, not just making oxygen derived from water we can extract, but there are many other volatiles that we can utilize for synthesizing materials, for example. And I really been enjoying playing a role on this committee to get a greater understanding of what everybody else is interested in as well.
Great. Ryan, go ahead.
Like Rachel said, I'm Ryan Watkins. I'm probably going to use all of my time with acronyms here, but I'm in the Exploration Science Strategy and Integration Office within SMD at NASA headquarters. And we run the Lunar Discovery and Exploration Program, LDEP. So under LDEP is the CLPS, Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, Artemis Science. We do a lot with international agencies that are wanting to send payloads to the moon. So my office kind of manages all of those programs. And I don't actually serve on this committee. I'm representing Joel Kearns today. He's our representative on the LSIC committee. And I guess prior to coming to headquarters, I was a lunar scientist. So it's good to see a lot of familiar faces here. A lot of new ones as well.
Jessy Kate Schingler, Open Lunar Foundation. Y'all just heard from me. But briefly, we are, I guess, the only organization in the world that's entirely dedicated to good governance and positive precedent setting in the lunar domain. My background is in computer science, distributed systems, governance, and decision making.
Right, thank you all. And just to be clear, this is a subset of our executive committee. We do have representation also from ESDMD, but they weren't able to make it, as well as others from industry and academia and nonprofits. So before I ask my first meaty question, there was a question that came through that wanted Ariel to give us again the name of the new nonprofit that you mentioned.
Sure, it's a nonprofit for space architecture R&D and outreach called Aurelia Institute.
All right, thank you very much. So what I'd like to talk about today is the theme of the meeting, and what we're really going to dig in tomorrow are the NASA envisioned futures, and this looking forward to 10 years down the road, when we get up to the end of the decade and we're starting to try to deploy infrastructure and really build things up. What do each of you feel like is most critical to be done right now to make sure that we can get there? So, there's near-term investments going on. What do you think we're missing that, or maybe we are doing, but that really needs to happen now in order to make sure that we can be there in the future? And let's actually, should we reverse the order this time so I'm not, or is someone super eager to respond to that first? Because I would like to hear from each of you. All right, Jessy, are you open to? And it doesn't have to be technical, it can be.
I mean, personally, in the interest of saying things that we haven't heard before, I was reflecting on this question earlier and thinking that one of the things that I haven't seen discussed much is storage and retrieval on the lunar surface. And that's something we're going to need in the category of infrastructure. If we are going to have sustained presence, I think that we're going to have sustained presence of infrastructure, and likely we're going to have cycling robots and humans coming and going. And so some effective mechanisms for doing that, I think, will be interesting.
Okay. Ryan?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of thinking from a CLPS perspective, because it kind of it's the present and the future, I think. And one thing that's really great about the CLPS program is that we do have kind of the opportunity to grow and expand in terms of tech development and the science that we can accommodate. So I think, yeah, a couple of things. One just being, seeing new technologies developed, whether it's within STMD or the community or via our CLPS vendors, things that can really start to enable our sustained lunar exploration, things like surviving the night, mobility, all these things we're already kind of working towards, but just finding more rapid and affordable ways to really do them, I think are key for some of these kind of near-term, 5-10 years down the road developments. I agree with Jessy on the things like, sampling strategies and then how are we gonna, store them and then bring them back. I think a lot of these things can be done commercially as well as within NASA.
Okay. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, it's hard to rank all of them, but I'll start from things that are probably closer to Earth. And I think I was glad to hear or see on a few slides that getting our more frequent flights for partial gravity experiments, I think, are really important when we start thinking about building chemical plants, if you will, on the moon. We really need greater understanding of partial gravity effects and moving fluids around. I will also include partial gravity related to surface engineering, which means that how do we modify surfaces to facilitate those conditions when we're having to move fluids or mixed phase fluids in reactors, things of that sort. So that's the closer to Earth things. I would say the next priority, and someone already mentioned storage, our understanding of sorption properties of not just the lunar regolith, but other materials is very limited. And we need to, I think, conduct both ground-based experiments as well as microgravity experiments, and not just experiments, to actually make measurements of, under equilibrium conditions, of the sorption properties of volatiles that we expect to extract from the lunar regolith. So I'll leave it at those two.
Okay. And one thing, as we move forward, I know that Ariel, you have a lot of expertise with these other flight opportunities other than CLIPS. So if you want to jump in and respond to one another, I welcome you to do that, because I think if we can have this more of a discussion, it'll be great and engaging for folks. So if you have anything you want to add to that, feel free.
You read my mind. I was actually going to say, when it came around to my turn, there are a few technical enablers, but on the structural standpoint, we have so benefited from the NASA Tech Flights program, the READY solicitation, and it would be fantastic for us as academic participants to see more opportunities for lunar flight opportunities run through something like Tech Flights. CLIPS is fantastic. We're going to be able to participate as a customer downstream of CLIPS. So again, leveraging that NASA ecosystem that's been set up, but having a series of opportunities beyond PRISM, beyond Luster, that can run through something like Tech Flights for lunar experiments would be really fantastic. On the technical side, I was just going to jump in and say dust mitigation is something we're looking at really seriously with some swarm robotic technology. Can we have little ways to dust off solar panels or handle dust within gearing better? The second one, I will give credit to Jessy, Kate, and Open Lunar for really expanding my thinking on this, but landing pads and thinking about infrastructure that will allow us to have repeated successful missions where we're not looking at a bare sheet moment, but can actually make sure that a wider range of actors are able to have a more straightforward landing and takeoff eventually from the lunar surface. And then third one, I think Ryan already mentioned it, but I would just second power architectures for surviving the lunar night. Really interested in tall towers and maybe a beaming approach to get over certain lines of sight. Those are the top three that MIT is thinking about right now: power, dust mitigation, and maybe the landing pads for infrastructure.
Okay, let's move back to George. Sorry to leapfrog you there.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the one that's nearest to my heart. The great challenge to sustainability for any lunar program is the high cost of transportation getting to the moon and getting home. If we develop the lunar resources, in particular, I'm thinking water resources from the poles for liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen propellant, we can cut the cost to go from Earth to the lunar gateway by a factor of 2. We can cut the cost to go from Earth to the lunar surface by a factor of 3. Each of those from just a single refueling of the upper stage that's going from Earth to that destination. And we can cut the cost to go from the moon back to Earth by a factor of 70. And so the sustainability benefits of developing, an ISRU capability for lunar propellant in particular is truly revolutionary in terms of creating that lower cost environment that lets everybody do what they want to go do. And since we were talking about CLIPS a minute ago, one of the first steps to developing those lunar resources is exploration. We need to get down into those deep PSRs at the lunar poles and really understand the nature of the ice deposits that are there. We have high confidence that they exist, but we really don't know in what state they are, how deep they go, all that kind of stuff that you need to know in order to develop the extraction and processing capabilities. And so I would encourage a CLIPS mission into a deep PSR. I understand the Viper mission is going into a very shallow PSR, but the remote sensing data that we have shows the strongest presence of ice in those deeper PSRs.
Okay, and then David, if you'd like to chime in.
Yeah, sure. Let me take us home on this question. So I think the biggest, what we have right now that we need to keep up and maintain is the momentum in this community, and the momentum that's been developed with CLIPS. And let's be, honest about the companies that are out there. The fact that there's a lot of money in our economy right now that's allowing investments that are non-traditional from sort of typical government investments. So I think right now we have a huge amount of momentum. It's a great confluence of NASA program planning through CLIPS, building on some of the other commercial activities, and some capital that's out there in the economy, and it's really giving companies like our middle-aged space company the impetus to change our business models, which is really I have to say a lot of fun. We're investing and building a lunar comm infrastructure that we can't wait to market to the entire world. So I think we have momentum, and we need to keep that up. And I guess I'll just say that the way we keep up that momentum, other than just through meetings like this where we exchange ideas and create opportunities for mentorship and information exchange, I think we still need to worry about building our community into a level where it's sustainable, where there's a pull from other people that want to do things like be it gaming or art displays or whatever it is out there at the moon. We need people to be able to want to do it for their own reasons, because they're going to be the customers that take advantage of George's reduction in cost and of Ariel's entrepreneurial ideas from academia. We need to continue to expand the community and make sure it's sustainable. So momentum, we got it. Let's keep it up. We'll probably, have a little bit up and down with momentum. So let's be prepared for that. And let's build our community even bigger. So good on you, LSIC and LSII and STMD. And let's expand it even more.
Okay. I'm going to turn to a few questions from folks online or in the room, whoever's sending Slido questions. The first is actually a comment, and I'm going to read it because I think it's a great idea, and we will take it as a finding. It was just that this group would benefit from inviting the civil engineering community with geotechnical site development, geological analysis, and whatnot of base camp sites to potentially present to us and to really hear from them. And I do think that's important that we reach out to some of these other communities and help educate our own members, and then conversely share with those communities what we are trying to achieve. Now we have another one. This was directed to Ariel. Can you expand upon desires beyond Prism, Luster, and Clips? What would you like? And actually, after that, sorry, I'm gonna ask a question and then talk over you. After that, if others would like to chime in about flight demonstrations and whatnot, and other creative ways to do that, because we have a lot of this middle area to get through to get things fully matured and deployable. So any creativity from the group is welcome.
Yeah. So one of the most impactful aspects of the tech flights program that NASA runs right now for microgravity and suborbital opportunities is the repeat opportunity within a single year or year and a half of a grant. So you can fly 2 or 4 0G flights over the course of the year. That type of repetition, if we were able to get that in terms of being able to manifest academic payloads on more than just one flight, surface of the moon within a year or 2-year timeframe, allows us to really do iterative work, learn from whatever mistakes we will inevitably make for the first mission, get data back, improve upon that same experiment, and send another copy quickly. Really do this iterative and more entrepreneurial development timescale. In addition to the CLIPS model, something like tech flights, again, where there are certain entities like Zero G or Blue Origin, where those companies are set up to be able to charter small scale academic payloads that aren't going to be multi-million-dollar large kilogram payloads, but are small, almost like rideshare payloads that can maybe be snuck in on a CLIPS mission, which is actually how we're kind of operating for our mission with Intuitive Machines next year, which is we're a small swarm robotic payload and a small camera depth field payload on a mission that otherwise has no Kia on it. So additional opportunities for more modest academic payloads would also be fantastic.
There's actually a bit of a follow-up like riff on that, directed to you, but oh wow, there's a whole bunch here. Ariel is going to be like star of the show here. But there's a question about what could NASA do to help some of these demonstrations in space architecture scale to scale to something that provides true infrastructure, like to go from the demonstration scale to the applied scale. And actually others, if you want to jump in, feel free.
Maybe we'll let somebody else answer first and then I can add my thoughts on it.
Well, I guess I'll jump in, and scaling up is a big deal, both from the size of an experiment, but also from the size of the community, as I mentioned earlier. And so scaling from a small experiment like Ariel's talking about to something larger is really a perfect example of what we need to do more of. And I think actually the fact that we're doing things in 0G at the Earth, and then we're scaling that up to make it apply at the moon. Now let's make it even bigger and more. And by bigger, I don't mean big missions necessarily, although we'll have to do some of those, but I mean number, quantity. CLIPS is going to happen, and chances of all of those missions succeeding as planned is not huge. We all hope they do, but the fact that there are so many is really the thing that helps us. So I think, in terms of the quantity of robotic missions is a big deal. Scaling that up, and again, kudos to the CLIPS program for the model of making, extra payload capacity sort of owned by the provider as opposed to owned by the government. It's just easier that way, and more of them. I think there's always a danger with aerospace that, well, if you're going, why not add a little bit more? Why not add a little bit more? That's important. But if we're going to make the moon a sustained economic place, what we don't need is one big mission. What we really need is lots and lots of people feeling ownership of activity at the moon.
Ryan, do you want to jump in with anything relative to CLIPS on that? Because it's such a groundbreaking model to have these smaller, competed, repeatable, low-cost missions that just like really completely upending the way we've done things for years. So.
Yeah, I was having a few thoughts on CLIPS, and sorry if this is kind of scattered because I might just pull up my thoughts together at once. So I know Ariel mentioned, kind of wanting something beyond, like the PRISM and type of those types of calls, but because PRISM is what I know, you can fly tech demos on PRISM. The caveat is that it has to somehow connect to the science investigation that's being proposed. I understand that sometimes the tech community and the science community are a little bit disconnected. It can be hard to find someone who might be proposing a science investigation that you want to, fly your tech demo with. And I think one of the focus groups, at least for PRISM 2, did kind of like almost a speed dating type thing where they just had everybody come in and talk about their ideas and try to pair up. So that's kind of another way if you just kind of want to go with the typical, PRISM CLIPS model. Those are within the scope of PRISM. You just have to tie it somehow to the science being proposed. And we're exploring, other options for PRISM as well that are, a little bit different than our typical just, suites of instruments. Again, with CLIPS, we have This might be a little more NASA internal, so I haven't quite fleshed out what it looks like, if you're not, within NASA, but for manifesting payloads, we have our CLIPS Manifest Selection Board, or CMSB. This is tri-directorate, so STMD, SMD, and ESDMD all come together, and this is kind of where we make decisions on payload manifests, and often, STMD might say, hey, we have this payload we're developing, we'd like to fly it, and this is kind of the decision board for flying those types of things. So, Nikki's over here, and go talk to her if you have some ideas. So that's another way we fly payloads on CLIPS. And then like David said, you can always go to the providers directly because they do have extra payload space. I have no idea what it costs or anything like that. But there's again, just trying to say there's multiple ways to kind of get things flown via CLIPS. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to add, Rachel. Those are kind of my thoughts.
Well, there's one more question that kind of feeds off of that, and I don't know whether it's something that you can answer. You probably don't have any control over it based on what I know of NASA paperwork or whatnot, right? But could you comment if NASA could announce the PRISM effectively CLIPS landing site sooner so that folks from different communities could know where it's targeting and see if there's proper tech that might be infused into it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And
I added some words to that, sorry, whoever wrote it.
Yeah, that's definitely a question we get a lot. We've had folks from the community suggest that we have like kind of a long-term strategic plan for landing sites. And things like that, they're a little bit difficult because, priorities are sometimes change, or you find a new science neat thing that you want to go investigate. So what we do with PRISM in particular is we release a community announcement that says, hey, we're going to solicit, this is where we're going. And really, at this point right now, that's kind of all of the, advance notice we give. It's usually several months in advance of the actual solicitation. And so that might not be enough time for some of the things that some people are thinking about, but we kind of have that timing kind of in place for our vendors more than anything. So they have an idea of, okay, this is where we're going. They can start planning, on their side to be prepared for those kinds of landing sites. I would say, we at some point will solicit like a site agnostic call. It doesn't matter where you go. So you can be thinking about payloads that can go anywhere on the moon. We'll solicit standalone payloads as well. So, again, just single instruments instead of suites of instruments. So yeah, at this time, we don't have, like a strategic plan or a plan to release, like, these are the places we plan to go, but it's definitely something we're talking about internally.
So there's another sort of follow-up that, just says that because PRISM has to be science-driven, there are some tech elements that just can't be, can't be directly related to some of the big science questions that are going to win a PRISM. And a question about whether there's an opportunity to have dedicated CLIPS tech demo flights. Since we have the process in place, is that something that's on the table?
Yeah, I mean, again, so again, PRISM is FSMD, it's science, so that would kind of have to be something that comes from STMD that they'd probably have to pay for it. Sorry, Nikki, if they wanted a dedicated tech demo. But yes, it is something that can be discussed. That would probably come more from the STMD side than the SMD side.
Nikki, do you want a mic?
Sorry, putting you on the spot here, Nikki.
Do you not want a mic? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And there's something that's also somewhat related that I don't know if anyone on this group will be able to answer, but I'm going to read it as something that NASA can, absorb as a question from the community. And that is whether NASA has mechanisms or plans in place to solicit payloads for Starship from the science community. And if it's ready for the capacity that Starship will provide. And that can be a homework question if people don't know.
So I gotta get my brain straight.
Is that on? I don't know if that's
No, it's on now.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, so we have several solicitations coming out of SEO within the next year. Roses 23, I think you see some placeholders. And some of those are for things like deployed instruments. I mean, this deployed doesn't really indicate that they're like mounted to the side of Starship, but we do have several solicitations in the works. I would say check out Roses 23 because you'll see some of the placeholders there. I don't have any comments on timelines yet, but yeah. I mean, we'll solicit for payloads for those types of things.
Okay. There's so many good questions and I'm like, things are getting upvoted, so I'm trying to push towards them. So there's a question that asks, and this is for anyone, many processes are not testable by short plane flights. What is the tipping point between simulated environments on Earth and the in-situ lunar testing? So, especially, and maybe this to George and Michael in particular, who've worked with some of these technical elements that are going to need to be tested. Do you have a sense of what aspects we can do here, and when we get to the point where it's like we just got to put it on the lunar surface and that's that?
So I can start with that. We try really, really hard to simulate lunar environments on Earth. For example, in our labs at Colorado School of Mines, we're able to simulate vacuum, which is one of the environments that you worry about. We're also able to simulate very cold temperatures, which you would encounter either at the lunar night or in a permanently shadowed region. We also have what we call our Lunar Test Bed, which is kind of a big sandbox. One of the big challenges on Earth is simulating, 1/6 gravity, which obviously affects mobility systems and traction of wheels and things of that nature. We've just recently installed a sort of a spring offload system to where you can suspend 5/6 of the mass of the weight of an object, but obviously that has its limitations. So there are limitations. Dust environment is one that's important to simulate. All of our vacuum chambers allow regolith inside, so those are called dirty chambers. NASA has a few that are larger. Been trying to work with Lockheed, and Dave can jump in here. Lockheed has currently an unused large vacuum chamber that we're trying to convince them to help us make dirty. In other words, allow regolith inside, so you can test vehicles that are larger scale, something like a LTV or LTV components. So we can do a lot of things on Earth. But the proof of the pudding, where you're going to experience all of those environments simultaneously, can only occur on the moon. The other tough thing to simulate is, and we're working really hard on this as well, is the chemistry of the lunar regolith and all of its other properties. Lunar regolith is very unique stuff. It's been created by shattering and meteorite impacts over billions of years. Creating that stuff on Earth is hard to do, quite frankly. And the best simulants that we can come up with only simulate certain properties of actual lunar regolith as we determined from Apollo samples. So there's a lot of challenges. And if you really want to get the final answer, you got to go to the moon.
Oh my goodness, we have so many good questions coming in. I'm going to direct one to Jessy because to sort of bring this back around to something that I was hoping we could discuss as well. So the question was, do you think a method of payment or lease for technology left behind, oh no, someone upvoted and I'm losing it, left behind could be behind to be reutilized could be a middle ground for use of technology investments. So it's kind of like a, buy a used system if someone wants to repurpose it.
I think it's a great question. And it's something that it's another one of these areas where I think we can straddle technology and policy in really interesting ways. I think we're all familiar with the ongoing and growing conversation about debris and disposal in Earth orbit. And although we're nowhere near that being a problem around the moon at the moment, we are starting to see lots of payloads being sent on these CLIPS missions that are just going to sort of sit there and become trash after they are left behind. And that might be either bolted to the side of a lander or sort of scattered in the nearby area. So coming up with some sort of mechanism for reuse or salvage, extending salvage rights to the lunar surface and figuring out what that means for standards, what it means for liability, what it means for sort of material longevity, and bringing some intention to that, I think are all really interesting areas that we could play with. I think the specific question was about contract mechanisms. I don't have a specific answer for that, but it is something that we're exploring with the trust that I spoke about earlier. And we're talking with some of the commercial companies out there about ideas for working with them to essentially have an asset transferred into the trust after the end of life of the mission in order to hold it in trust for some future repurposing of some kind. So it's something we're exploring, and I think it's a neat idea.
Okay.
If I could jump in a little bit and add to that, sorry. I think one of the things that is starting to happen, and Jessy Kate just mentioned the trust, but I think we have to recognize that with the Bereshit is the first one, and with other CLIPS missions coming up, it'll be the first time that privately owned hardware will be on the moon, because that hardware is not delivered to NASA. So everything else has been in the policy realm and in the contract mechanism realm and whatnot, because it's government-owned hardware. It's sitting there, the U.S. government owns it, or the Chinese government. Well, once we have private industry owning something that's sitting there, I can tell you that we're, investing in and building a lunar mobility vehicle that we plan to have it last for 10 years. We don't want it to turn into trash. We want to be able to use it. So once we have private assets up there, whether it's something that gets transferred into a foundation, or whether it's something that is a company like what I just mentioned, our company wants to, find more users for it. The mechanisms for making things happen, once it's not government owned, I think are much broader than we normally think about in the aerospace community. And I think we're starting to get there. And that's part of the excitement of where we are right now, is there's things that we can do that we just haven't even thought about yet. And so we need to continue to be creative and make those things happen with that momentum that we have right now.
Okay, so we have about 7 minutes left, and there's one question that's kind of a generalized one. Well, let me ask the most upvoted one, and I don't know that if anyone has an answer or they're willing to throw it out, but the question was, are there any recognized single point failures to human habitation on the moon? Is that anything, and I'm not quite sure if the question is, is there something that if we can't make it happen, we're done? Or is it, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have left that one upvoted and not read it. What's that, designing for maintainability? George, I saw you raise your hand there, or were you scratching?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, obviously, if you're designing human habitation on the moon, you would design it to be single, if not multiple fault tolerant. And I completely agree with the comment on maintainability. That's the one thing that aerospace has never really done, is fly systems that were designed to be maintained for long periods of time. You may say that the ISS is a counterexample to that, or exception to that rule. But most spacecraft, for flying Perseverance to Mars, it's not designed to be fixed, repaired, maintained. So designing systems to be repairable and maintainable is the key to having long-term single fault tolerance. Obviously you don't want a single failure to be causing human death in a human habitation on the moon. But those are all engineering problems that are very easily solved.
Okay. So as I said, there's a lot of questions in here, and I will send them to the panel and try to get answers for folks that we didn't get to them. But I am going to ask one of the also upvoted ones, which is, as the executive committee, what do you think should be LSIC's next steps? What should we do as a consortium? And I know I kind of picked your brains about this yesterday, right? But if each of you has kind of your own personal, what would you like to see us do, either in the next year or even down the line? Like, now that we have this mass, how can we use it for good? And let's go, how about we start with Michael? We're going to go kind of from the middle outwards.
That's the easiest question so far. I think we need to lobby for funds to get this done, quite honestly, as a community, because we're talking about a lot of things here and the funding restrictions associated with it. But I think that's what I'd like to see, is as a community, lobby our legislature to provide the adequate funding for this.
And actually, rather than jumping around, if someone wants to, if anyone else would like to jump in, go ahead.
I'll say 2 words: knowledge transfer. There are a lot of young people in this community. There's a lot of, I say middle-aged, but let's be honest, there's some folks that aren't going to be around as long. We've been thinking about going to the moon for a long time now. Knowledge transfer between what we know and, for honestly, throw out what our old bad habits because it's old aerospace. But knowledge transfer and momentum building and, the getting the excitement, I think that's huge. That's the biggest thing we can do. So mentoring, internships, job placements, entrepreneurial opportunities, anything that can get more and more people involved to learn and carry the torch.
All right, excellent.
David stole mine. That's what I was going to say as well. Yeah, I mean, mentoring, getting more young early career people in, and I think kind of giving them experience too with the process of developing a payload or a tech demo or whatever it might be. Start them early so that when they get ready to apply to any of these programs we've talked about, they have a little experience.
Okay, anybody else want to jump in before we hand it? And there's a teaser on here asking about whether MOSA could help with the repurposement or maintenance in those, and that will be our next panel. So I will just mention that it's there and say somebody's asking, and then we'll wrap up and hand over. If Ariel, go ahead.
I think George raised his hand first. I'll go after George. Go ahead.
Sorry, George.
Yeah, so my suggestion comes in part from my perspective as a member of the NASA Advisory Council. I'm on the NAC for the Exploration and Space Operations Mission Directorates. And sitting through the advanced exploration presentation at the NAC meeting back in January, I noticed that there was not a single use or application of LSII technology that is acknowledged in those plans. And so I think if the LSII and the LSIC can facilitate working more closely with the actual exploration directorate to get some pull for some of these technologies, to actually get them in the roadmap so that they're visible and start working on how to cross that valley of death. I've been in technology development all my career, and the valley of death is real. And STMD can't, throw things over the chasm to HEO and expect them just to pick them up and run with them. So there has to be an overt effort to bridge the gap. And I think LSI can help facilitate that. And, there's a lot of creativity in how do we get these things from technologies to actual applications.
All right, thank you. And Ariel, super quick, and then we'll pass off to James in the panel.
Sure. I was just going to say heartily seconded. Exactly where George was aiming at was what I was thinking is LSII and LSIC's role in efficient coordination of matching technologies and mission objectives to actual flight missions. And I'm just going to post a link here to an MIT website that we would love to have more of the LSIC community participate in and work through a database trying to track many different levels of lunar activities and avoid duplication of effort, maybe find partnerships, identify areas that are underexplored, both technology and systems wise. I think that's a fantastic area for LSIC to invest in.
Yep, and that is linked from the LSIC website as well. And maybe we can, I think we've talked about trying to host Ariel and her team to give a demo of that to folks on either in a workshop or a monthly meeting. So, okay, thank you all so much. It was great to talk with you. I appreciate all of your efforts on both the executive committee and here.